start off with, I want to just introduce you to where we come from. And the beautiful island of Cyprus is our home now, but originally we both also from South Africa. We've had time relating to the Cyprus, and it was really there that we had very interesting discoveries of our common interests in integrative health and the importance of integrative health. I'm trying to share my screen, so just let me know if you can see what I'm presenting to you here now. And in a moment, I'll be starting this presentation.
We can see the screen.
Okay, everybody can see my screen?
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay, a minute, I'm going to start it from the beginning here. So the beautiful island of Cyprus is in fact a island just in the middle of the Mediterranean. We actually have variants of cancer. On the island, we have very low vitamin D, ironically, even though we're in the middle of
Helen, sorry to disturb. Your voice is breaking. Helen, your voice is breaking. Can please check with your internet connection or audio? Your voice is breaking, Helen. We're not able to hear you properly. There is no audio.
I suggest that you with here is not picking this up.
No.
You can still hear enough. Okay, so when we look
Then, can you hear me?
okay, so
Yes.
here
Now please start with it.
yeah, so here on the island of Cyprus, as you see, you have both myself, Helena, Georgiou, and myself, Helen, Argyrou, two Helens. There are so many of us on the island, so we have distinguished ourselves here with different endings to our names, but basically both found a very strong interest in integrative health, and we will be presenting that to you today. As I mentioned, this island is 10,000 BC, a very interesting place with some very interesting demographics. We happen to have the history of the goddess born from the sea here, but ironically, a very complicated set of demographics, because what we've seen is, in fact, a very strong level of cancer in Cyprus. We have lots of infertility. We also have a very strong tendency for women to have problems in not being able to have natural childbirth here. We have an NGO that lobbies for that. And we've seen in recent times as well a chronic amount of burnout, not specifically in Cyprus, but in the female population, chronic illness, and many women suffer these on their way to career success. We've also, as I mentioned, had the rising cancer statistics globally, not just in Cyprus, but also globally after COVID, increase in anxiety and substance abuse by women. We've also seen, as I mentioned, chronic illnesses, rise in Hashimoto, autoimmune disease, and infertility, all indicating a very strong, almost undeniable link with hormonal health in women. And this is sort of where we would want to begin this discussion today, because we've had this as the backdrop for the presentation today, which will start with myself, Helen Argyrou. I'm a clinical psychologist for 25 years, trained in South Africa. I also have speciality in Enneagram typology, which looks at the neurosis of personality and how we all have an ego that can sometimes get us quite stuck in our blind spots, and a very special interest in creative modalities. I ended up and stumbled upon rhythm and drumming and ended up doing a lot of research on the neuroscience of rhythm and how it affects consciousness. Also in my career, I've looked a lot at the construction of identity, specifically in women, self-esteem, value, and how we construct our perception of ourselves, and also how we're perceived in society. So a lot of gender identity research. And I'm very interested in this meeting point between spirituality and scientific evidence of what goes beyond the ego, of what are these peak states, what is consciousness, and how does it translate into psycho-spiritual well-being. This is really what led me on a path in recent years to look more at training and supporting women. And in Cyprus, we have a very strong patriarchal culture, as we have in many places around the world. And so we've seen the rise of a lot of women wanting to now start businesses and to actually have decision-making in politics, in the peace conflict resolution type work that's also at play here in Cyprus. And of course, as a therapist, I would also work with many people behind the scenes in closed proximity and hear a lot of sort of secrets in people's lives. And this caused a lot of interest in me to want to do more psychoeducation work as opposed to just clinical therapy. And that's where I started Women of Truth, and subsequently was invited to ambassador for Cyprus on Female Wave of Change, a really powerful global network that has a strong presence in Africa that's based out of the Netherlands, and then for G100, which is another very interesting movement out of India that actually has over 500,000 women working globally on gender equity and women's economic empowerment. As part of that journey to start working more with women, I established a movement called Women of Truth. And I'll tell you more about it in a minute, but let me first go back and explain my first interest in multidisciplinary approaches or creative therapies was looking at how we could involve more creative modalities, invite more people to work on themselves, create more group cohesion and organizational systems that are healthy in our society. And I became very interested then in entrainment, which is a very interesting way of understanding how the brain has a response to a certain piece of movement or sound and can actually become entrained to that sound. And that led me down the path of studying and now presenting on the neuroscience of entrainment, which is ultimately a way of calming down the sensory system, the central nervous system, and integrating the senses. Along the path of learning to drum myself, and then to also teach people to drum, and really using it in clinical settings, in NGOs, in training circles, and in many different therapeutic contexts, it became more fascinating to also understand that there is a kind of whole brain activity that can happen that really connects the mind and the body. So we are not just separate aspects of ourselves, and we are not just a condition, we are a combination of many things. Also along the way, it was clear that there are very important trends now in what we are calling heart-based conscious leadership. So how do we bring the whole being together and look at a person as a unified whole. And there's also this very interesting concept that I visited and worked with a lot called the heart-head coherence, this idea of being in the zone, all indicating that there is a very powerful way that we create synergy inside our whole being. And so we also require our understanding and our treatment methods to be more integrative, just like we are an integration of many different things. Along the way, I've also then, as I mentioned, worked with neuropsychology, but then also collected people that think more integratively, and also people who think in new and innovative ways, because when we are creating, we are sometimes at our most productive, our most optimal level of functioning. And so part of my work has been to do a lot of conferencing. The most recent interest has been to look at the COVID pandemic and the stress that leadership endured, and leaders themselves on the ground, grassroots, or in corporations and organizations, and to try to provide new methodology or new ways of thinking about stress management. And we wanted to look at something that goes beyond the standard burnout prevention and also resilience training. And so my contribution to a book of 6 experts who present different ideas on how to manage stress for these specific times that we're in was looking at eustress and something that in ancient Greek was referred to as evdaimonia, which is a state of meaningful happiness as opposed to the feeling of happiness. And it is in this collation book project that we all presented some new ideas for these very specific times that we're living in. And eustress really points to the idea that we can use cortisol reaction in the body in a positive way, and therefore boost confidence in normal lifestyle choices, and in fact build more achievement-based activities, even in times when we are highly stressed. This helps us to manage stress. And eudaimonia, as I mentioned before, is a state that combines happiness, flourishing, and well-being, and is quite distinct from a series of repeated pleasure-type responses. So it's really a change in attitude and a change in the search for meaning in life, as to be one that is connected to also having a sense of flourishing and well-being, and then assessing oneself to be healthy and happy through that. So these are 2 modern day study points, but for now, the main interest area in presenting to you today is to bring to you the very strong importance that we found over the years in the women conferencing work since 2015, which used to run under the Greek name Yin Aletheia, which means women become the truth, which was looking at the deeper psychosocial factors that actually contribute towards disease, chronic illness, and all kinds of emotional, physical, mental breakdown in women, generally speaking, and to look at the deeper psychology of what they are needing in order to reconstruct themselves, both as they were, but also as more influential leaders for the future. So these are some of the projects that have been running, and you see the one on the right is actually a collection of female leaders that were part of a research study that asked, as we were tracking it through the years, 80 interviewees, 73 speakers, but eventually rose up to the number of 100 women who were asked the question you see on your right, the biggest lie women believe, and then they were asked, what is the truth? And I've just published that in a book which covers the discourse analysis of these interviews. It became a bestseller on Monday. In fact, we're very proud of this work because it was in its own right a real labor of love to be able to work through this content, through COVID, through my own illness, and also through many, many ups and downs. It was finally clear that we need to work on deeper aspects of cultural heritage, on a type of amnesia that women have about their own self-esteem and power, and really address the way that women evaluate themselves and the skills that they end up learning in order to really ensure ongoing health. I'm sure many of you are aware as well that this now is not a presentation of all the stats and demographics, because I'm sure you've come across enough of that to know that there is a very strong link between childhood trauma and the future diagnosis of a chronic illness. There are some very specific correlations and sometimes even causal factors. And the recent research that is looking at, for example, just breast cancer is showing very clearly that anxiety and depression as precursors are often indicators of how well a woman will recover after diagnosis and after treatment. So we can clearly see that there are links between our emotional and physical well-being, as well as our mental and our spiritual well-being. And so as Women of Truth, we're lobbying for integrative health thought leadership. We are providing awards to the women you see on your right, who have all been nominated by the women in the circles. And these women have been referred to us and nominated for their innovative, strategic, or inspirational work in the field of wellness and well-being. And some are health practitioners, medical doctors, and authors, coaches, therapists, who are bringing a new approach or saying something traditional in a new way. But certainly most of them are respectful of the integrative health approach. And this is why we decided to showcase it in Dubai on the 31st of May, 2024. You're all invited if you would like to come along and join us. We have 2 more speaker slots there. And we're building the visibility of this message because we truly believe when women are diagnosed, they are not treated with enough emotional awareness and or delicate kind of handling in terms of their emotional and psychological state. And this is a very important factor for women, given that most of their conditions are at times, but most of them hormonally driven, especially when they're mood related, that this is a very important factor. And so now I'd like to bring you to the closing point where I introduce my colleague, Helena Georgiou. She's also been one of our speakers at the conferences. We run over 6 of them, mostly in Cyprus, 1 in Rotterdam, and as I just mentioned, the next one in Dubai, 31st of May. We're also interested to attract integrative health or natural, organic, ethical products and services that we can showcase in front of the women at the conference. And so we'd welcome anybody who wants to collaborate. And we are in fact working with a NGO here in Cyprus for the same event in 2025. So we'd like to keep collecting intellectual property that looks at body-mind connection through health and wellness. And now I want to hand over to Helena Georgiou, who's going to give you her testimonial evidence of her own journey and how integratively many different tools and techniques really helped her through her own life journey. I'll come back to you at the end to just say goodbye. Thank you so much. Over to you, Helena.
Thank you very much, Helenique. Hi, everyone. I am Helena Georgiou, born in South Africa, currently living in Cyprus now, and an author of a book that was recently published in January, which reached bestseller on Amazon, called Breaking the Silence, Voice of Survivors. And I am a transformational speaker on sexual abuse and domestic violence, as well as a holistic practitioner and relationship coach. Next. This has led me on a path that has interacted with women from all kinds of fields, both professional, both single mothers. It's welcomed me on the Women of Truth inner circle, where a great deal of my personal development and healing has taken place. Thank you. Next. So I am very much focused, along with a lot of my colleagues, on the mind-body-spirit connection, which has a great example in my personal journey, as I shall share with you shortly in my personal study case. Next. The body keeps the score, brain, mind, and body in the healing of trauma. I know that, I've lived through it, and you will hear the example shortly. In 2014, the author, Dutch clinician Bessel van Kolk, wrote a book, and he examined how trauma rewires the brain and changes the way people experience the world. And that is a fact. It's been shown in research and many statistics worldwide. There are integrative health modalities, such as mind-body interventions, that really help to release the stress and mental conditions which have become on the rise. For example, art therapy, something I've used, mandala drawing for stress relief. There's yoga, meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong. There's various plant-based compounds like ashwagandha and chamomile, as well as also the medical cannabis that's used and very helpful regarding PTSD. And you'll hear about that shortly on the next slide. Thank you. So the post-traumatic stress disorder and trauma has a huge connection. You will see my statistics on the next slide, Helena, please, where it shows that there has been a huge increase, especially post-COVID 2020 worldwide, globally, which means it's something that really needs to be addressed now. And it's something that I personally experienced and have found with regards to focusing, especially. A lot of work is needed with that, with traumatized individuals and PTSD. There has been a 3.6% experience increase in PTSD in a year, and 1 in 11 people have been diagnosed with PTSD in their lifetime. When you think of the 8 billion plus on the world, that's a huge amount, isn't it? 1 in 3 have severe trauma and they develop PTSD. So that's actually every second, third person you're meeting, which is quite frightening. And of those diagnosed, at least 22.3% have severe symptoms. So the symptoms we're looking at can be personality disorders, it can be focus and mind disorders, it can be abusive disorders, as well as depression and suicidal thoughts and attempts as well. The next slide, please, Helena. So the use of integrative therapies for PTSD provides options for those who are not interested in traditional modalities. For example, when they have limited access to traditional treatments for various reasons, maybe because of the country they live in, maybe their financial situation, maybe their personal traditions, beliefs, religious beliefs as well, or are seeking a more comprehensive approach to managing their PTSD, a combination. The next slide, please, which is something I found very helpful in my healing process and trauma recovery. So let us discuss now, what is trauma? It's generally any sort of experiences that causes someone a huge, very high degree of stress, distress in their body, and it's also relative to the person's personal experience of it. So we all are wired differently, our neurological systems react differently, and often that goes back to childhood experiences, dysfunctional relationships, various reasons like abuse, domestic violence, somebody who might witness a tragic event, somebody who might actually have been domestically violent or traumatized, abuse in childhood as well. And you'll hear about my story shortly. So everyone reacts differently. There are many trauma therapies to address this, as I discussed earlier, with the integrative health therapies that are available, the yoga, meditation, etc. The brain is affected by trauma, doesn't always know how to tell the difference. So it can be anything small that can trigger you even after your recovery, maybe not on the same level, but in a smaller amount. And you have to constantly be aware of what it is and where it's coming from, and work through that, especially if it goes back as far as childhood. So something harmless can seem very serious. The important thing to consider is embracing a holistic approach to the trauma recovery and the effective strategies for managing this emotional healing, especially when it comes to emotional dysfunction or disclosure or denial, where the victim is unable to deal with the emotions, so they just kind of suppressed and not dealt with. And that is a very, very serious side effect in the long run. Adopting a holistic approach is crucial when addressing trauma and embarking on a healing journey. Trauma support is compassionate and empowering framework, and it acknowledges the trauma effects on the individual's well-being. So it needs to be dealt with on the emotional level, but just not on the surface. We're looking and talking about deep diving here, going to the root of the issue, where the trauma started, and working and clearing that in a healthy, supported, professional manner, where you are dealing and sharing with someone you totally trust, that you know are there for you on every level and supporting you, that you're not alone, especially. That's really important. So it guides us towards a better healing, resilience, and personal growth. So on my next slide, we'll talk about my personal case study, which is about trauma, having survived childhood trauma and overcoming not only emotional neglect, but narcissistic abuse with my abuser, my caretaker, and domestic violence as well, which continued then into my adult life, in my relationships, and all went back to when I decided to deal with this situation in around 2016, my midlife, and my children had been raised. I had time and to work on myself, and there were little things coming up emotionally, which developed into something really serious physically, and it was a real physical stiff neck. I woke up severe pain one day, and as a holistic practitioner, I realized that there was definitely a connection on a deeper level within my body, that my body and emotions were talking to me, because all our emotions, it has been proven by a research neurologist with science spiritual connection nowadays, that the body cells retain all the emotional experiences way back to childhood if necessary. And that was, in my case, what had happened, that after deciding to go on a psychotherapy treatment with a clinical psychologist that I could trust and was completely supporting me on a regular basis, at least twice a month. And I discovered that through this physical pain, even though I'd reached out and gone the medical way, I'd gone for physiotherapy, I'd even tried acupuncture, it was just not resonating with me. Having come from and being a very spiritual person, which is what I honestly believe has helped me get through the half of my life so far. This aided my ability to be able to focus on the holistic approach alongside with the medical, with the holistic integrative alternative therapies and the psychotherapy. So I was introduced to various therapies, for example, like the neuro-linguistic programming, the NLP. Other therapies that are available is CBT, the cognitive behavior therapy, and the eye movement desensitization and recovering processes. All these are the top three that's used basically globally nowadays. But the option is, for me, what really worked and what really helped was the combination of everything. Having come from the holistic background from very young in my life, it's always been a passion. I used that on myself, and that's the best healing, the best example for case studies in my case, and worked on it over at least a year or two. It was really deep, that I had to go into various experiences dealing with the narcissistic abuse that I had and how that affected me, the domestic violence as well as the mental emotional trauma, and balancing that with my spiritual practices, which honestly I believe is really important on this trauma journey. It helps us to be more compassionate towards ourselves, but also to be able to forgive ourselves for what has happened, and if possible, the perpetrator as well. So coming through all that now, after so long, I was able to heal the serious parts through the inner child work, through a daily meditation, yoga, various practices as a herbalist, using herbs to help me calm my anxiety, dealing with panic attacks, and essential oils, for example. And then obviously using this in my practices when working with clients as well. to help them on their journeys, mostly single women who have now become very successful businesswomen. And I include myself in that as well, because through this deep therapy and success that I experienced on all levels, the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, I was then able to focus on myself in a way I had never been able to before, and commit to self-development, mindset programs. I was able to do a public speaking course where I got on stage last year through the Women of True Cyprus Integrative Health event, where we collaborated with amazing women internationally on various subjects regarding women's health, not only sexual abuse, domestic violence, and trauma. There was an amazing lady that spoke about her experience on human trafficking and honor killings. So it was a great platform to be, and I continue to support this work and very honored to be part of it, and realize the importance of the combination of the integrative health, women's health, and coming out and sharing our story and coming together to support ourselves. Through that too, my book was written as well. I was able to express myself, and I'm a study for the fact that it is possible to overcome these kind of serious traumas and scars and wounds and turn them into a wisdom and a passion that we can use to fuel and ignite a better, more positive world that we're living in, to be heard and know that this needs to be done. So I have my website, helenabraveheart.com. I welcome you. I would love to chat. I'm offering a free connection call, 15 minutes. Connect with me on my Gmail, Natural Healing Power Force. And I'm also on the media pages, LinkedIn, Facebook. You can contact me there. I'd love to talk to you or be on any of your platforms, webinars, summits, podcasts. I've got that experience too. So thank you for your time and this opportunity. Helene, back to you.
I just want to mention to anybody that's interested to connect with Helena, the 6 is actually an error. Apologies for that. So you need to go to the code 357-99164 if you want to connect on WhatsApp. And these are my details. If you do have any interest to support our work in Dubai, or if you have partners, products or services that relate to health and well-being and integrative health, specifically, we'd be most interested to talk to you as well about that for both Dubai, Cyprus, and we are considering 2 more conferences in Saudi Arabia and New Jersey next year in 2025. And you can also check that website at the top. Helen Aha is my website. You can get into the Women of Truth work if you're interested, or even to support any of your clients if you feel like they need a more woman support circle. You know, there's lots of information there on how they can join us. There's a free Facebook group. And then, of course, we are interested in collecting intellectual property, any new techniques, any new health strategies, innovative approaches to the body-mind connection, and how to offer more integrative practices and treatments. We're most interested in that as well. Thank you so much for your time. And most of all, thank you for your patience in my rough start tonight. I really appreciate your generosity in offering more time for that. Thanks to everybody, and thanks so much to the organizers as well.